All right. Hello, everybody. How are you out there? I hope there's people out there. We are here today. Hey, Russ, thanks for joining me, first of
Hey,
all. Tell them who you are.
I'm Russell McKenzie. I'm a software development engineer on the Step Functions team. I've been working here for a couple of years, and it's my sort of specialty is the service integrations part of Step Functions.
That's right. So in the tweet, I was promoting this earlier this morning, and in the tweet, I said, I have some of the engineers who built this with me. So bring your questions. So we may play Stump the Chump later. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But also, Chris is with us. Chris, if you want to throw something in the chat channel so we know, he's on Twitch moderating. So he's going to be answering questions and helping us out. And I see we've got quite a few viewers out there. Throw a hey, hello in the chat so we know where you're at, where you're coming from. So we go. Oh, Novak G24. Hello, how are you, Novak? Where you viewing from? We'll have others popping in there. Real quick, again, I wanted to thank Russ. I'm going to be really honest. I had a scheduling issue, and Russ is jumping in last minute to help us out. So I really appreciate this, and he's going to be showing this. And today we're going to be talking. This is today's Step Functions. We'll talk about what we're jumping on there. Step Functions orchestrate life. That's right. All right. So if you weren't here last week, Ben Smith and I talked about getting started with serverless. And there's a lot of people get started with serverless in a lot of different ways, but there's a lot of tips and tricks that you can learn, especially from folks like Ben and myself who have been doing it since the day they announced it. So encourage you to watch that. Jump back to the YouTube playlist or the Twitch videos. And that's there. We've had some new things coming out. So if you're ever curious of what's new in serverless, we have a feed just for you at s12d.com, what's-new, where it tells you things that are coming out, like SQS now supports high throughput mode for FIFO queues. That's first in, first out. API Gateway REST APIs. This kind of snuck out the door. API Gateway REST APIs integrates with Step Functions synchronous express workflows. So not just asynchronous. Now you can do the synchronous ones as well. And another new one that came out was the Amazon Kinesis Data Analytics Studio, which is interactively query data streams, develop streams. Again, it's powered by Apache Flink. So if you do a lot of streaming, you do a lot of analytics, really encourage you to take a look at that. All right, some new blogs we have out. If you don't follow, I make this joke every time, but I'm going to make it again. I don't know, Russ, if you know who James Bezic is. He's on our team. James writes a blog. James was on vacation last week. I'm not kidding. He was on vacation, and he released a blog first thing this morning. It's ridiculous. He writes a blog every 7 seconds is the joke. And I console myself by saying, yeah, but they're no good. But they are good. They're great. In fact, I really encourage you to check out James's newest series. If you're working with streaming data, serverless application with streaming data. This is part 1. There's more parts coming out. It's really, really solid stuff. The last thing I'll talk about here is the serverless patterns collection, which is at s12d.com. This goes back to if you're getting started. This is where we have lots of patterns. Hey, I'm using Kinesis. I want to go to Lambda. Here it is. So you just say the services you're working with, and we'll filter all the different patterns. And the developer advocates are adding more patterns all the time, as well as external ones, third-party patterns being added. And now we're here to today. I've gotten the kind of the busy work out of the way, and so Russ, I want to tell them just last week, right? We announced it? No, yeah, it was last week, right? Or 2 weeks ago.
Sounds plausible.
Yeah, you're like, I don't know. It's a couple of weeks ago. I know it's in the news. I know I helped push the block. So it's actually been a couple of weeks.
But yeah, one thing I'll say was that we really try to release continuously, and so I don't track. They flow through the different regions. That's I think one of the big strengths of AWS is that we can do that. The safe rollouts by going region by region. So when you say what day something launched, it's like, well, we're around the world. We're going, I don't know, 20 plus regions. So
what days? I guess. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So all right. So we have some more hellos. Hey, great to have y'all here. I do love this statement someone put out there. If you're not familiar with Step Functions, the Step Functions orchestrate life. What's your elevator pitch, Russ? When someone says, what is Step Functions, what's your elevator pitch?
Should have prepped this. Should have asked me before. So Step Functions is a workflow orchestration tool, right? You define a state machine, give it some input, it flows through, and you pass little chunks of JSON from one state to the next.
Right.
So all the real work typically happens outside in other AWS services, but if you kind of trying to separate those concerns of getting a little nugget of work done and kind of orchestrate it, triggering the next unit of work. If you had a big long Lambda function doing some specific task, you wouldn't want to also have that Lambda function responsible for calling the next thing. So it's a lot better to kind of come up a level and have one parent who kind of can oversee the whole process. That lets you sometimes have different teams working different parts, or there's, I think, lots of reasons to enjoy that. Then there's also the service integrations that we offer try to simplify the experience for a lot of AWS things, where a typical pattern might be that you have a long-running task in some service. You've spooled up a cluster and you're going to use 50 computers to run some big data processing job. And when it's done, you need to take further action. So someone has to, monitor that job. You call the API to start it, you get an ID back, you have to, eventually someone has to query and ask if it's done, if there's more to be done after that. Maybe it's a fire and forget kind of thing, and it just does its thing and then ends. But, a lot of the time you might care to, take further action at that point. And so that's, our service integrations do a lot for that, to, make it easier to deal with those long-running tasks, for example.
Right. So you hit quite a few nuggets in there. Yeah, it's the orchestration is the big thing, right? We orchestrate. We don't do the work. You're not doing a lot of logic, although you can do some logic in step functions, but we don't do a lot of the logic. We farm that out. Hey, Lambda function, do this, or let's directly integrate to DynamoDB and store something, or let's drop something on EventBridge, which we're going to talk today, to where we can fan out some events or continue the process. So yeah, that was a great elevator pitch. I will tell you, when I first started, Step Functions is kind of my last frontier. When I first started here at AWS, I did everything in a bunch of Lambda functions, or one. I'm guilty. I had the one Lambda function with 900 lines of code doing the if then switch this, that, if then whatever. And so when I finally kind of embraced event or step functions, which Rob Sutter, you're probably not watching, but this is a call out to you. Rob Sutter really pushed me to do this. Rob Sutter's theory was that every web call, so let's just say a simple API, every simple API should be driven by step functions. And I pushed back on that. I was like, come on, until the synchronous step functions came out. Then it was like, man, now very, very simple ones where I'm just calling Lambda, getting some data, pushing it back. But if I'm doing more than 2 or 3 steps, man, move it to a synchronous workflow or asynchronous. Asynchronous is always a better approach if we can do that. But either one. That's a great information. So what I want to do is I'm going to actually turn it over to you here in just a second. I'm going to bring up your screen just a minute. But I want to let the folks know what we're talking about today. Again, we had this new feature that came out where it's actually an EventBridge integration for AWS Step Functions. So Russ is going to be demonstrating how this works. And there's kind of a couple of ways you can do it. So with that, Russ, I'm going to bring up your screen. And I'm probably going to interrupt you a lot and ask questions because, it's me. But let's see a demo.
Sure. I was just going to add one more bit to my elevator pitch first, which was Step Functions is useful in a really broad array of circumstances. So you mentioned using it on a web request or something, but you can so that's sort of one end of a spectrum. Probably something fairly short running, but you can have a step function state machine execution running for up to a year, which is crazy long compared to most things that people are used to, right? So because some workflows have a really different nature to them. So an example could be you're a bank doing a loan application and it's gone to some point in the workflow, and now we have to send it up to the senior branch manager for review or whatever, and then when they're done, they're going to click approve or whatever, and then it's going to route its way back, and we're going to carry on to more and more steps. So you might have things that the branch manager is on vacation for 2 weeks, and so these things can span all kinds of different time scales, which is, I think, pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's a great call out, because sometimes I oversimplify by that, but vast amount of options when using step functions. We had a question real quick here, and you may want to talk about this later, but there was a question popped in and says, what was the QA like on to test the year-long step invocation?
That's a good question. Yeah, that predates me, so I can't really speak to it.
So we're hiring someone to watch that for a year, though. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, that's They mock the
you need
system
3 employees to monitor it 24 hours a day, right?
There we go. Yeah.
I mean, I think inherently it's a pretty interesting feature. And again, when you compare it to things that are running for, maybe it's 30 seconds in API gateway, or 5 minutes and 15 minutes in Lambda, it's like, people blows their mind when you talk about a year. I'll get back to that.
I don't have the attention span. I will have forgotten I even wrote that program a year later. It's like, what is this? So yeah, no, I hear you.
So I'll talk about today's thing, the EventBridge integration. So we're going to build all this in the console. We're going to build a little simple application. We're going to running through our step functions workflow, and at some point, we're going to say some business event happened, and we're going to put an event up to EventBridge, which is a great way to sort of decouple your system even more than sort of like step functions is one way to decouple it, but you're sort of by moving it up and moving those decisions out somewhere else. But going to EventBridge lets you like really decouple it because you don't even know who's talking to who at that point.
Yeah.
And then we're going to add a rule in EventBridge. It's going to invoke a Lambda function and do a little bit of work. So that's going to be the sort of first part. That's going to use our request response style of service integration. So step function is going to make the call to EventBridge and then immediately carry on with the workflow. Once we've got this built, we'll move on to a slightly more advanced example. So then we're going to, in that Lambda function, keep track of this something that's happened, and we're gonna just count up by storing it in a DynamoDB table, and then we're gonna use the it's got a hilariously long public name, like wait for a callback with the task token, which colloquially we call wait for task token because that's the little suffix that you put when you actually type it into the Amazon States language. So in that style, the workflow, we're going to make this call to EventBridge to put the event, and Step Functions is just going to stop and wait for up to a year, like I said, right? And then we're going to pass in that event a little token generated by Step Functions, and Step Functions is going to wait until somebody calls back and says, okay, the task is now done. Here's the token for it, and here's the output, the payload that goes with this. At which point, Step Functions will kind of wake up and carry on with the workflow.
That's so cool.
So we're going to use this first in this sort of just emit the event and carry on way, which is probably very natural for EventBridge, and then we'll use it in this sort of, it's part of a larger system, and I know that someone will get back to me eventually. And here it's fairly direct, but it could be as long and circuitous as you want, as long as you keep track of that task token.
Right. Okay, you used the word colloquial and circuitous. Both are big words. I'm impressed. I was like, man. So I don't use big words, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So go ahead. Sorry, there's no point to that. I just throw that out.
Okay. I had pulled up this page. I didn't actually have anything to say, but I'm sort of admiring our big list of service integrations. There's been a big trend, I think, over the last since a couple of years to really expand this set, and we see it going in a lot of different sort of directions, different topic areas. But
I think the one, before you move off, I think the one, it's really interesting because we integrate with our serverless things, DynamoDB, SNS, SQS, obviously Lambda functions, things like that, EventBridge now, and of course another step function. But also you look at EKS, EMR on EKS, or just directly to Amazon EKS, or ECS, AWS Fargate. So if we have these super long running functions that we need to happen that are beyond that 15-minute, this is a whole other discussion, but let's say, all the caveats are said, that we have this long running that's longer than 15 minutes. We can't get it, break it down, anything like that. Then I can pipe it off to an EKS or a Fargate or something like that to do that job. And it's really slick. We did have a comment out here that said, please add S3 to this list. So there you go. So
sure. Yeah. Duly noted.
Duly noted. Thanks, Alpercodes. All right.
Okay, so I think we can probably just sort of dive into building this now. So just recap here. I'm going to start with the EventBridge part. We're going to build and then get it calling Lambda. Then we'll go back to step functions and sort of get this little path complete.
Awesome.
So first thing we're going to do is make an event bus. So there's always the default event bus. This is what all of the AWS services are publishing their events to.
Right.
There's nothing to stop us from using that. We're going to have rules that understand our events. Our events could just move in alongside those ones without any trouble. But I'm going to make a totally separate event bus for my application here, which I'm going to name my app very creatively.
Very creative.
Yeah, so we're done. It wasn't too hard.
That was quick and easy. Yeah.
So we've got an event bus. It doesn't. It's just waiting for events to come, and it doesn't have any rules attached to it, so it's not going to do anything with those events. But we can take a look. We can send an event to it. So I'll pick my app as the event bus, my event source. We're gonna send it in from. We call it my app again. And today, my example, we're going to say we're creating user accounts. That's what my step functions workflow is theoretically about. So it's going to emit this user account created event. And then we'll put out a little bit of payload. So that's what we're expecting to receive sort of from step functions. And so the detail of this is going to be a username and a country. So we've got Ken from Kenya as our first user here.
I like that alliteration. Yeah.
Get ready. There's lots to come.
Well, so let me stop you real quick. Just as kind of a little rabbit we can chase, which I know you have a lot to do, and I'm going to annoy you at some point. But so my background, just I'm a public speaker. I was a pastor forever. And so we're taught these alliterations. So when I saw Ken from Kenya, I'm like, oh, hey, that's great. It's like, that's awesome, So no point to that. Please continue.
Sure. So this is what the sort of full little payload of an event looks like. This is when it goes on the event bus. An event really is just like this little JSON blob with those fields that we just filled out. I can hit send here. It's not going to do anything because no one's listening for these events. So I made the event, no one was listening, and it's going to run its course. So we sort of completed our first sort of stage here. So the next thing we want to do is get this event and pass it over to a Lambda function. So we're going to hop over to Lambda. We're going to create a new function here. I'm going to sort of just copy paste in my stuff to make sure that I don't get too carried away. So I'm going to call this guy track new user demographics. So, this isn't fundamental to the creating a user account, flow that I'm doing. This is kind of an incidental, side thing, which is why it's so nice to have it decoupled from my main step functions workflow. That's why we're sort of going with an event. This a user account was created, and at some point, maybe a different business unit is interested in this. So we're just going to hook up to that. I come from the film industry. All of the content creation tools use Python, so I'm a little more familiar with Python.
I was telling Ross
to create a Python function.
People are going to be excited that we're using Python because everything I do is Node. So this is good to have a shake it up a little bit.
Let's give that a couple of seconds to pop up here, and it gives me a default little stub here. So I'm just going to paste in, save us a little time watching me type. So we're gonna. I put in the little blocks for sort of the entire thing here. We'll, as we sort of go through this demo, we'll flesh these out, right? So initially, my Lambda function takes in conveniently named event, which is sort of very topical for the event talk today. So don't even have to rename that or anything.
Right.
So I'm just going to lightly use it. We're going to print out that event to our log because we're sort of in development debugging mode right now. We're going to pluck that country record out of that JSON blob that sort of is the event. It's in the detail parameter. We're just going to print a little message to our log, and then we're basically done. We're just going to return at the end. Nothing too interesting there. So let's see if this sort of works. I'm going to configure a test event. I'm just going to bring in that piece that I caught earlier from the EventBridge side. So we got Ken from Kenya here, and I'll just name this this test event account created event and create my little test. So when I click this big red test button, it'll run my Lambda function with that that payload, and we can see the response we returned in the last line of the function. We can see the logs that got spit out. We printed out the event, and we printed out welcome to our new user from Kenya. So nice. We can also we saw the results there because we ran the function from the console. We saw them here in the console. But when we're running this Lambda function, normally we're not going to be in the Lambda console. We're going to be off in step function. So we can also just hop with this link in the monitor tab over to CloudWatch, and it'll take us to the log group where all those same log messages got written. It'll hop us right down to it. We can see the log stream, click on the first one, and we can see that same message there. Welcome to our user from Kenya. Cool.
So I'm going to interrupt real quick. We had a question on here from Sahil Ku. Is this code out somewhere in GitHub? So this particular code is not, but we have a full demonstration of this feature and a code base for it and a blog, which you were asking about. And I just posted that on there. I'll actually post it to both YouTube and Twitch. So I'll just post it there. So you have that. We also had another question. Is there a performance-related benefit to choosing? Okay. We'll actually talk about that a little bit later when we get into this. Talk about which languages performance-wise using with Lambda. We can jump into that a little bit later. So, all right, go for it.
Okay, so let's go back to we've got our EventBridge event bus. We've got our Lambda function defined. Now we want to get them hooked up. We want to get this little invoke arrow built. So back in EventBridge, I'm going to get the sidebar. How about? And we're going to define a rule. So rules are sitting there monitoring all the events that arrive on the event bus, and decide if it needs to then trigger other actions. Many it can fan out to multiple actions. Right. So I'm going to go to my app here, and we're going to create a new rule. I'll give it a name like track new user demographics rule. Seems fitting, and we're going to match a custom pattern. So we know what that JSON payload looks like before, and we're only interested in tracking these user account created events. Maybe my app has other events for other purposes, user accounts deleted, or maybe who knows? It's a business; it does all kinds of things.
Right.
So I'm just going to go past. This is where we're going to define our event pattern. I'm just going to go down a little further, and we're going to have the little test spot for it. Test-driven design or something. We're going to put
That's
the test
right.
Right. So I'm going to paste in again one of these payloads here. This time it's Scott from Scotland, and I figured I needed to add an ID for it to really like it. Perhaps if I test right now. Yeah, we don't have a filter yet, so it's not happy about that. Okay. So up here, we're going to define a filter, and I just did it. So I'm going to look for these little JSON blobs like this that match this pattern. If the source is going to be one of this set of one things, which is my app, the detailed type is going to be user account created, and then that's what this rule is looking for. So now I can hit test event pattern, and got to save it.
Yeah, fail.
Hit test event pattern,
and
then we'll see that it matches. And if I had some other event, then this should not match.
Gotcha.
So I'm pleased with this event. This rule is matching it correctly, and now it's time to make it do something. So I'm going to scroll down and make a target down here. I'm going to select conveniently. It already knows my Lambda function, so I'll just pick it out of the list. And you have the opportunity here to reshape your data, kind of similar to what a lot of the step functions stuff can do, where you want to sort of pluck out certain fields only, or reshape it, or inject some hard-coded data, or whatever it is. We're just going to pass the event through sort of untouched. So I'm just going to go ahead and now we're done. So I'm going to create that rule.
So notice he could have added second targets, multiple targets for a single rule. So you can do all kinds of different things with that. So
So if you use EventBridge as this real central, clearinghouse of for your events, it can, all kinds of people can be paying attention to them. All right, so now I'm going to, let's send an event and watch it call Lambda. So I'm just going to do this like I did the first time. I'm just going to send this event right to the console. So again, our source is my app. Our detail type is a user account created. And we better get another user here. I'm going to go with Maurice from Mauritania, just for fun.
Yeah.
Or, yeah. I might have actually slightly changed this first. No, we'll go with Scott from Scotland again first.
There you go.
And then send that along. So, we don't see a lot happen here, but if I go back to CloudWatch, we should see, I don't know if it'll be in a new log stream or a second event in the same log stream. Okay, when in the same log stream. They roll over at some
right, exactly.
Sure
As new execution environments. Yeah.
So we can see welcome to a new user from Scotland. So we got it hooked up correctly. EventBridge went to Lambda.
Nice.
So doing well. Now time to go to my homeland. Go to Step Functions next.
I'm going to pull up this question we had there. It says, I guess all this can be done using SAME as well. Eric, can you post something about that as well? Yeah, I can. And yes, you absolutely can. There's actually some, I believe we have it in our patterns. If not, in my Sessions with SAME series, I show how to build out EventBridge with step functions behind an API gateway, all that kind of stuff. And while Russ is talking here, I'll grab some links for that. So thanks for that question.
Sure. Yeah, I'm personally not that familiar with it, which is why I'm kind of doing it the live drive through the console.
Yeah, no, this is fun. Well, and the nice thing about this is kind of interesting when you're prototyping, like when you're figuring out the rule pattern and stuff like that. That's a great way to prototype. Then grab that rule, drop it in your SAME template if you need to. But if you're trying, what rule is going to work on this? What does my event look like? And so the EventBridge created that. Here's that. I just typed in the details. Here's what I wanted to do. So yeah, very, very helpful.
Yeah, and we're going to see the step functions part, like the service integrations. They're very like multifaceted feature. At its core, they seem simple, like, oh yeah, we got to call another service.
Right.
Some of them are more complicated. Oh, and we need to monitor that thing. That requires us to understand a little bit about how the different API actions relate in that other service and which parameters correspond to which other things. But there's a lot of other varied pieces and lots of like little niceties that come in. So some of those are console related. So building and playing the Step Functions console is I think a pretty interesting place to do and to sort of get more coverage on this launch. And it would probably be weird to build half of it in SAM and then go into the Step Functions console.
Going back and forth. Yeah. So like I said, especially when you're learning, it's a great place to see that happen. So like what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so I'm creating a state machine. Step functions, state machines are defined in the Amazon states language. You can find the spec online and also like in our docs. It's all, it's JSON. There's a bit of a learning curve there, but I'm pretty familiar with it. And we have pieces like these code snippets to help make that easier. So I'll end up probably just pasting in the one I've got created, but I'll sort of demo the code snippet first. So we're going to pop this up, and it's going to give us a little builder widget here. It gives us, there's a bunch of parameters that we need to call put events, similar to what I did in the EventBridge UI when I was using the send events, like little button. So I'm just going to sort of populate those here, and then, the screen kind of zoomed in like this. It has a slightly different layout. So it's going to sort of populate this preview pane down below. If I was zoomed out a little bit, it goes beside it. But
be next to it, yeah.
It's just one step. I'll zoom out just for this part. I'll zoom back in after.
There you go. Yeah.
So we can sort of watch it build this little piece of Amazon States language on the right-hand side as I do this. So I'm just going to start by using this little picker that will let me pick out of my event buses, and we'll see it filled out my app there. And then I'm going to take the detail, and this is something I'm going to specify at runtime. This is the input to our workflow in this case. Okay. So I'm just going to do that, and it's going to come from a field I'm going to call user data. So that's sort of building this section.
Okay.
And then our detail type, we said was going to be capital user account. So I shouldn't be typing. Created. And the source, we were going to hardcode that to be my app. So at this point, I've sort of built this. I can copy that to my clipboard and then like paste it to my workflow and then start to hook it up. So this state above it, the transition from hello is now going to go down to my next one. And when that's going to be a terminal state, so I'm going to have it end be true. And that's sort of, now I've sort of injected that bit that I generated with the code snippet into my workflow. So I'm just going to go grab just to make sure it's all correct. I'm going to go grab it off my clipboard just to be safe. So here, so we're going to start at the create account state. That's what this line is doing. Then we're going to define the set of states. So create account is our first one. In this case, this is sort of a stand-in for whatever the real work would be. In this case, I'm just using a past state, which we're just going to use to reshape and play with the data a little bit, but not do anything too meaningful. In this case, I'm going to use a thing called an intrinsic function. This is a relatively new Step Functions feature, maybe 1 year ago, where we say, Step Functions isn't doing a ton of work, but there are some pieces that make your life a little nicer. Just to, there's some of the simple transformations that you
that
need
doesn't
to do.
make sense to pipe it off somewhere and come back.
It's kind of a hassle to do any other way. So we're seeing a trend towards increasing flexibility there, but I don't think we'll ever see it be a full featured programming. It's not I don't use Python, I use ASL. No one will ever say.
Right.
Well, never say never, but anyway, so we're going to make that.
ETL.
We're going to output that into another piece of our JSON data, and then we're going to move on to the main attraction here, which is that we're going to call this EventBridge put events service integration, and we're going to pass it an event, which looks like this. We've specified a detail type, event bus name, and source. So I can just go ahead and hit next here. It'll take me to the sort of, I want to finalize kind of creating this. I need to give this a name. My state machine is probably not quite good enough. So I'm going to go with create user account state machine. And then, whenever we're having one service talking to another, we need to have permissions to do so.
That's right.
And so one of the really cool features of Step Functions in the console here is that we can have it analyze that ASL and determine what permissions we need. And, so the service integrations have some, carefully written magic in them to do that inspection and come up with a minimally scoped role here. So if I go down to the bottom, I'll see a little detail section about that. And it mentions it's going to use this EventBridge put events scoped access policy. So it determined that it was able to know exactly which event bus I'm talking to and scope down the permissions for put events to just that particular event bus. So pretty cool. And then if I dynamically specified the event bus in my workflow, then it would switch this to a full management access policy and then give me broader permissions that it requires. So yeah, pretty slick.
That is slick.
So just go ahead and create the state machine. It's created this new IAM role. Like I said, we can just take a quick look at that. We probably have to wait 30 seconds for all the IAM role to propagate anyway. So
right.
Way to kill some time.
Filler.
Speaking of which.
It's not loaded yet.
It's still not loaded yet. Yeah. Give it a second. There we go. So they know about it now.
Yeah.
Oh, rate exceeded. I'm just going to skip this part of it and go on to
that's fine.
Back to the main event.
So that's what's happening there. Those are propagating, and they're just
it takes a minute or so for it to make it through everywhere. So I'm going to start an execution in Step Functions now. Again, we're going to see it go from Step Functions to EventBridge to Lambda. That's what we're after. And I mentioned when I was authoring it, I'm going to pass in this user data field in my record, and it's going to have the data inside of it. We got Olivia from Bolivia.
Love it.
And okay, so that's fast, only a couple hundred milliseconds here. Our first state took that input that we passed in. It did that, used ASL, did that little bit of processing from it, and we constructed this new string. Olivia is from Bolivia, and put it into a another field of our data. So we're accruing some data as we go through our workflow. And then we called send an EventBridge event, and then it was successful, so it turned green, and we saw that it gave us back the event ID. You can see the sort of really detailed history down here, but the sort of graph inspector lets us visualize the progress of our workflow. It's kind of pretty neat, I think.
Yep.
And if we go back to CloudWatch, we should see that actually happened. Hold on. Should be a new. I got to maybe check my role. Maybe my role is wrong.
Okay.
Okay. What rule did I make? Switch to this. Want my app, user account created events. Those look good. I sent out a my app user account created one. That seems good. Give this one more refresh.
No problem. And I would kind of expect it to be in the new stream, but
yeah, I would too.
So yeah, I'm thinking it didn't invoke.
So I mean, it definitely, we know it made it to EventBridge. That part is clear because we saw in our execution, that we did get back an event ID. So it's sort of successfully received by EventBridge. And then if my Lambda, I'm just going to look at my monitoring as well.
It's
invocation. That was a little while, no invocations really recently. So yeah, it didn't trigger across. So there must be something about my event sort of and the rule that didn't take.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have you look at that for a sec. I'm going to answer a couple questions while you're tracking. And if you don't get it, that's okay. I can't tell you how many times I've said, all right, so we're going to need to fix this and tweet out the answer, but you're going to watch us debug on live because that's what we're about here. So couple of questions. I'm going to go back. Some of these are related. One we have, and Chris, I know that you're on the Twitch channel, but we had a question. Is the EventBridge integration supported on both Express and standard workflows? And Russ, I think it's both, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The wait for task token only applies to standard workflows.
Okay.
And when going back to our service integration patterns, the request response versus .sync versus wait for task token, these long running ones only apply to standard workflows.
Okay, cool.
Going to be longer running, or might be longer running.
All right. And Chris, can you post that link? Can you post that link so folks can look at that, and I'll make sure it goes to both YouTube as well. But yeah, so that's Tiago Oliveira asked that, and so so as Russ was explaining, the integration is available on both. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. And I'm gonna just pop that up here, and actually I'll grab it, copy it, and move it over. The integration is available on both, but the wait for token is not. So just something to be aware of. And this is the joy of streaming to both services. So I'll go ahead and pull this. I'll put this in both here, and then I'm going to answer some questions that are not related. And feel free to interrupt me, Russ, when you're there. Okay, so I've posted that to both. Actually, let's try that again here. There we go. There's the answer. Okay, so Surly Dev had some questions that aren't really related to this, but are, because this is Serverless Office Hours, we answer as many questions as we can. So it says, I've got my first exposure to AWS Lambda. All right. AWS Lambda, great. Found you can export your function to a zip file, which can be handy to re-upload, restore the state it was made before any notifications. I noticed that in the zip file there was a GitHub repo. Okay. Is there a way to link my Kiln server? I'm not sure what the Kiln server is. That just makes me, but so that I can keep an offline copy of the function and source control. So what I would suggest, certainly, Devin, and then there's more to your question, says, I'm just a belt and brace kind of guy. Okay. Stored out of AWS. Okay. All righty. So here's what I would suggest to you. I would move, and one of the first things we say, and although you're seeing us build this in the console, and the console works great, I would get to a framework as fast as you can. And the reason for that is if I were to use SAM or serverless framework or there's CDK, what happens is that's all local. So when I build with SAM, everything's local on my machine. Right. So all my code is local and I can store it in Kiln, I guess is what you're talking about, or GitHub or something like that. I could store that local. Then when I deploy it, it's deployed to the console. I don't develop in the console and pull down. I build locally and push up. And that way I can put it into CI/CD process. I can put it in, I can develop or deploy directly from my my local environment, and then your version, and it's not as a zip file. You can just simply version your code in GitHub or code commit or a local repo or however you want to do, and then develop it as you make changes. Then deploy the updates or do it like a CI/CD pipeline that pushes through. So hopefully that helps to make sense. I'm going to put a link in here. Okay, yeah, that's what you want to do. Okay, so I'm going to put a link in here to serverlessland.com. This is a website that our team maintains, and it is maintained, and it talks all about serverless. And there's a lot about local development and that I work with. I have another series, and I'm going to put a short link to it here, called Sessions with Sam. That I'm putting. There's the link to the videos, and then here's the link to the code repo to see how I do a lot of that. And this is all about developing with SAM itself. So this provides that local development. Now, real quick, how are we doing? Russ, figured out?
I think I got it. Yeah.
All right.
I went with a different bus name when I
okay.
planned to.
Oh, gotcha. So it wasn't fine. Got it.
I should have just stuck with the code snippet because it populated it
right.
for me.
So what you were pushing to one bus and monitoring off another?
Yeah.
Got it. All right. All right. So Deb, you're absolutely welcome. Glad that helped.
There we go.
Hey, look at that. We got data.
So going back, yeah.
Data's flowing.
We're in Step Functions. We sent the event, and we saw on CloudWatch, welcome to our new user from Bolivia. Hooray. So that completes this sort of first big part, Step Functions with EventBridge to Lambda. So I'm going to have to sort of blitz a little bit here. So I'm not going to talk as much maybe, but I think we can sort of get to the end here, but I'll sort of keep it moving pretty quick. So the next part after those three is to get stuff stored in DynamoDB, and we're going to call back to Step Functions. So first thing I'm going to need is a table. So I'm going to make a brand new table. I'm going to call it demographics, and it's going to be partitioned on a field called country. And then I like to use on demand. It's a great mode for DynamoDB.
Yeah, especially developing. So
this will just take
in general
take a few moments to create, but we're not going to do anything else with it. So I'm just going to jump straight back to Lambda, and we're going to add some code to do that. But actually, before I do that, we're going to need permission to make those calls. So I'm going to hop over to my configuration tab, and the permissions gives me a link to the IAM role for my Lambda function. Pop over there. And I'm going to add a new policy here. That's going to let us call Dynamo. In this case, we're going to be using update item only.
Oh, okay, sweet. Right.
And then I can, if I want to keep this really nice and narrow, then I can even go right down to the, specify it right in here. I can narrow down to my region, that table. Keep this
Good.
nice.
So least privileges. Always least privilege. Even in demoing. I love it.
And it's got to throw some name on that. We can create that policy. Over in Dynamo, this is my table has now been created. It's an empty table. There's nothing to see here yet. So now that we've got permissions to call Dynamo, let's update our code to do so. Go back to my Python here. I'll just, again, paste it in, and we'll look at it. So the top is the same as before. We're using the Python's Boto3 library to create a DynamoDB client, which I've named DDB. And we're going to make a call to update item, the demographics table. The key is the country, which we extracted from that EventBridge event previously in the demo. And then we're going to use this cool thing called an update expression, where we can say, I want to just add 1 to whatever the current value is in the user count parameter. That's what this whole little block does. So a little bit of magic. So I'm not reading from the database, calculating the result, and writing it back myself. I'm just saying, hey, DDB, like add 1 to this, whatever it happens to be right now, and return back to me whatever the new value is in this updated new. We'll put that in a response variable here, and we're going to pluck that value out. So num users is going to be the updated tally of how many users are in the particular country that we just were registered from. And for now, we're just going to print that out to the console. So I can run that same test event that we had before with the test button here. You can see, as before, it printed hello to Ken from Kenya. And over in DynamoDB now, we've got an entry has just magically appeared and counted up to 1 because nothing plus 1 is 1. All right. We got 1 user in Kenya, so that's pretty good. Now we want to go and have Lambda. We can let's give it like a couple more, maybe. No, it's fine. In the interest of speed, we're just going to go ahead. Now we want to get Lambda to call back to step functions. So again, we're going to need some permissions for that. I think this is maybe this didn't work, but it worked. It's a little suspicious.
Yeah, it is.
Cancel? Oh, I was going to refresh that. We weren't able to make that call, so maybe I'm actually running as that's a little. Oh, I got signed out. There we go.
That happens.
One sec while I get logged back in.
Yeah, that's all right. So
we're
let me know when you're ready. You ready?
Yep.
All right, here we go. So we used accounts here that sometimes can time out on us. So if we don't set them long enough, kind of throw away accounts. So
get this to refresh. Just being a little. Am I logged back in? Let me see.
I'm going to answer a question while you're working on this. I'm going to go back. Chase asked a question. Chase Freeman says, "What is the best way to handle different environments for our?" Oh, you're not for our code base when using SAM or step functions. So, SAM is your local development tool. Step functions is one of the services that you can manage with SAM. It's like any of the serverless ones. And the best practice really is each developer has his own account, but we use the same SAM template. And so if you store that, it kind of goes back to what Surly Dave was asking. If I have a template that builds my environment and I use it to deploy, my devs are sharing it and versioning it and doing all the things, and they can locally deploy, then what will happen is that same template can be used to deploy to staging, to gamma, to alpha, to beta, to production, and just simply change out parameters because the template is parameterized. So if you have some strings that are different for each one, then I would probably store those in like secrets manager, and that would be unique to that account. So automatically out of the box, you get security because you're using a separate account, and you get this contextual data based in the template. So hopefully that helps. You went on to say, I have a SAM app that invokes a series of lambdas as needed. Probably should have looked at. Yeah, definitely. I would look at kind of re-upping that and looking at step functions because if you're orchestrating any more than one or two, it really makes sense to do that. And then your own. Yeah, you can assume a role for your own dev environment, or just I just use a dev environment very simply, and just that I create. I may have multiple environments that my machine can reach, but hopefully that helps. All right. Any other okay, so we did have another question. Russ, how we doing?
Good. I'm not sure why I keep getting a rate exceeded from.
Oh goodness. Here. Okay.
It's kind of strange.
This is on the create policy.
Another tab. Yeah,
okay.
I'm just one user in the console, so I'm not sure why it's not.
Yeah, that's
see if it actually did it work.
Someone said SRE, simple restart everything. So
I had it sort of coming and going here a little bit.
Yeah. So the tech guy asked, he's got two questions. Is the EventBridge, and feel free to interrupt me, Russ, is the EventBridge calling Lambda over the internet? No, it's actually not. In the same account, it's going to be doing it on the backplane, the Amazon network. And Russ, I'm correct on that, right? It's not calling over the internet to reach those. It's okay to say I'm wrong.
I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Okay. I'll find out.
It's not generally my area of expertise.
Generally when it's service to service, it will usually be direct. We might be different here, so I'll check that and make sure. The second question is, can I use SAM template to build step functions? Absolutely. And in fact, that patterns that I linked earlier shows exactly how to do that. And the nice thing is you don't have to format it in there. You can use an ASL, much like he's building here, an ASL template. Literally copy that template and save it as your template.asl.json, and then you can refer to that inside of the SAM template. So you don't have to do it differently in SAM than you do in the console. So, all right, what you thinking, Russ?
I'm just sort of going ahead a little bit, and then
okay.
I'm going to see if IAM stops fighting me at some
Alrighty.
point. I'm a little worried that we're going to get thwarted if I can't make enough permissions.
yeah. I understand.
Permissions are and if we don't, necessary, but
yeah, if we don't hit it, we can tweet it out. That's not a problem. So we got, how does error handling occur? So if Lambda fails, where's the message from EventBridge go? So there's a couple things you can do with that. Is you can, and I think Chris is probably answering these too, and feel free to as well, Chris. But you can configure a couple things. You can configure EventBridge to retry. So if and you got to look at what the fail is. If it invoked the Lambda properly and your code tanked, then that's considered successful delivery, but your code needs to handle that if there's some errors in there. But if for some reason the service failed and or couldn't get to it, throttling, something like that, then you can do retry with EventBridge. You can also set that if at a certain amount of time it doesn't, after retries, and it's kind of it backs off, so it's a back off retry. So it's not just going to pound away at it. It's got incremental retries. Then you can also write the data off to what's called a DLQ, where you can just set it up to sit in a queue to handle manually, or you can have some type of automated function that checks that queue periodically or something like that. So, all right, error handling. All right, now just so you know, even our smart we deal with troubleshooting all the time. So as Russ is doing right here. And again, don't sweat it if you don't get it. But how's it looking?
I continue to get rate exceeded.
Okay.
Alrighty. I'm just going to try clicking. I don't. Just in case it made it, like it's possible. Yeah. I'll at minimum sort of show you what changes we've made. So back in our state machine. Remember we had this top two states originally. So I've switched the send an EventBridge custom event state to add this wait for task token suffix. So this is what's going to cause my state machine to just pause after this state gets executed and then wait for someone to eventually call our send task success API, at which point then we can continue on. And then the bottom half of this is that, it's going to notice that happen. It's going to go to demographics updated state, and then that's going to be a choice state. And we're going to inspect the payload that got returned to us. And in this case, we're going to see if that value country user count is greater than 2. And if it is, we're going to transition to schedule user group meetup, because like more than 2. So 3's a crowd, so it's time to have a meetup. And then if the let that play to your life a little bit, and otherwise, if it's just low level interest, we're just going to go to this complete state and then just finish the workflow.
Awesome. Okay.
And then over on the Lambda side, to get that callback to step functions, I've made a step functions client again at the top, and then to call back, we're just constructing a little JSON payload, and we're going to call step functions.sendTaskSuccess, and we're going to pass it the payload here in this output field. So just dump that to a JSON string, and then we pluck the task token out. So when we called, I sort of skipped over that. When we called put events wait for task token, there's a thing called the context object, and that's where we make available the task token to you. And so the customer is responsible for taking that task token and placing it somewhere in their event, wherever they like. So here I put it in the sort of top level of my detail in a field called task token, creatively. And then we've extracted that field out, and then I'm gonna pass it back to step functions. That's how we know that this call to send task success relates to that particular workflows, executions, that particular state, and then marry them back together.
All right.
So all the code is here. It's just I expect we're likely to hit a permissions issue.
Okay.
We can give this a try. So I'm going to have Francoise from France is going to give this a try, and we'll sort of see how far we get. So we've called it. It turns blue because it's waiting for that task token to come back. And then I bet you that if let's get back to that monitoring tab and look at our logs, I'm expecting we'll see a permission problem here.
All righty.
We'll see. Let's check in on it. Yeah. Go to our log group, check our latest log stream. And yeah, we got an access denied exception.
There it is, yeah.
Predictably.
All right, so we have something's going on out of our control. So that's all right. Would you do me a favor? Would you do this? Would you make a gist of that ASL that we can tweet out? Because people are asking just of the ASL. And I'm going to answer a couple of questions here real quick that we had. So this pattern would be better to handle error retry logic in the EventBridge or the step function. And Russ, maybe you want to real quick answer that, which makes sense, and then I'll grab another one.
Yeah, I think EventBridge has an internal retry loop for taking a rule and retrying calling the target, and it does it for 24 hours or 185 times or something like that, if I recall. I'm not an EventBridge expert by any means. Yeah. But, in step functions, you'd be at you'd have sort of a different, you're kind of at a different spot maybe. So if you're sort of retrying submitting the event to EventBridge, that's sort of one thing, but you can also think about if there's other actions you need to take, and you can have some control over the frequency of retries, max number of attempts, the back off rate, and stuff like that.
Right, and it's important to understand what is an error. And I said it earlier. So let's take this scenario, and because the further question was, can you talk about error handling between tasks and step functions? So if my step function tried to push to EventBridge and it failed, then we've got an error that the step function needs to handle, right? Yeah. So we can handle that. We can do retry. We can do an if. We can do a choice statement, things like that. But if it pushed it, if it did successfully, if it got a 200 back from EventBridge and said, "Yep, I got it," then that's successful. So then, if the EventBridge fails, then you need to handle that error in EventBridge, right? And if not, then what you can do is say, "Hey, retry. That didn't happen. Drop it in a DLQ," and then I could pipe that. I could pull data from that. The DLQ is a dead letter queue, by the way. I can pull that and drop it back into the pipeline to be tried again later. So and EventBridge has some really cool replay stuff as well that is built in. With that, we are right at time, and so I'm going to have to drop us out because we got another show coming up afterwards. But I appreciate y'all visiting. Russ, fantastic job. We'll throw this, Russ, if you'll shoot me that ASL gist link, I'll throw that out. So I know some folks were asking for this specific one. So I'll throw out that ASL so you can kind of look at how that works. And again, next time, so let me throw in my screen here real quick here. Next week, we are going to be talking about multi-level base path mapping. If you're dealing with domains, custom domains, Julian Wood, Don Bushell, one of our PMs from API Gateway, are going to be talking about that. So with that, you bet we're getting a lot of thank you. You're absolutely welcome. We enjoy doing these. Hit me on Twitter. You see my EDJ Geek. If you have questions that didn't get answered, I'm glad to get that for you. With that, we are out. Russ, thanks again. Chris, thanks for answering all the questions. He was killing it out there. And we'll see you next time. Same place next week.